earlier in the season, we didn't know who the second best team in the Big Ten was. Bowling Green almost beat Penn State. Oregon probably could have, should have lost to Boise State. Had a rough one against Idaho. Michigan, we didn't know what they were. Now it's just not that great. And we didn't know who the second best team in the Big Ten was. There weren't as many options as there are in the SEC. But as we sit here the first week of October, what do you definitively know about the SEC? It certainly feels as if Texas is the best team in the conference. They're undefeated. The only one in the SEC without a loss. So I think it's fair to peg Texas as the best team in the conference. And after that, the question remains, who's the second best team in the SEC? Who is it? Do you have a definitive answer? Because I don't. You take a look at the options. What are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 teams that could probably argue, hey, we've got a case to be made for why we're the second best team in the SEC. Texas A&M is undefeated in conference play. They're 3-0. They're the only team that's got 3 conference wins. But they lost Notre Dame at home. That probably disqualifies you from being the second best team, doesn't it? You lost to a team at home that lost to Northern Illinois? That can't make you the second best team in the conference. That just feels incorrect. LSU's 4-1. But they lost to USC. USC lost on the road at Michigan, and the Wolverines didn't throw the ball farther than 1 yard down the field. They had 32 yards passing and beat USC. And USC beat LSU. That doesn't sound like the second best team in the SEC to you, does it? Because it doesn't to me. Alabama's got the best win of damn near anybody in America. They've also got the worst loss in the SEC. You lost to Vanderbilt. Does losing to Vanderbilt, does a team that lost to Vanderbilt sound like they are the second best team in the SEC? Not to me, they don't. Despite having the best win against Georgia, you lost to Vanderbilt. There are just some things that aren't supposed to happen in the college football world. And Alabama losing to Vanderbilt is pretty high up there on that list. Georgia's 4-1. But they lost to the team that lost to Vanderbilt. So can you put the Dogs at number 2? Because that would then be kind of just disqualifying what we saw happen. Where Alabama opened up a can of whoop ass in the first half. And then Georgia suddenly put the whoop ass back in the can and almost sealed it back up. But are they the second best team in the conference? I think they've got as good an argument as anybody. Ole Miss only has 1 loss. But they lost to Kentucky, who can't score. You lost to Kentucky, who can't do the one thing you need to do in football, which is put the ball across the goal line or in between the uprights and above the crossbar. Kentucky can't do it. And they beat Ole Miss. Just a team that lost to Kentucky that's, I think, has scored 30 points less than the next closest team in the conference. Does that sound like the second best team in the SEC to you? Tennessee couldn't put up 3 touchdowns against Arkansas. You just got to put the ball across the goal line 3 times and you win a game. And they couldn't do it. Does that sound like the second best team to you? Oklahoma lost to the team that they should have lost to, Tennessee. But outside of that, they've played really tight football with everybody on their schedule outside of Temple. Tulane played them tight. Auburn, who right now has the second worst record in the conference, played them tight. Oklahoma has not been a juggernaut, has the worst case of any of the teams on this list of like, hey, here's why we should be viewed as the second best team in the conference. I don't know that they do. But you know what? They're going to have an opportunity this Saturday to beat Texas, the number 1 team in the country, and certainly improve upon their resume and say, hey, this is why we should be viewed as the best team in America. Or not the best team in America. The second best team in the SEC. You're the best team in America. You have that chance to say definitively, hey, we're the second best team. Missouri probably has a case, except they got beat down by Texas A&M. I mean, from start to finish, pure, unadulterated domination at the hands of the Aggies. But they've only got one loss. So who among those makes you feel like definitively they're the second best team in the SEC? I think if you put a gun to my head and say, you got to make a decision. Is it Alabama? My eyes tell me, yeah, until you can't beat Vanderbilt. Is it Georgia? Well, you beat yourself in the game against Alabama. And your one loss is to the team that lost to Vanderbilt. It's the same Texas A&M. You're 3-0 in conference, which is, that's commendable. Being 3-0, you're the only team in a conference that has 3 wins. Those 3 wins came against Arkansas, Florida, and Missouri, none of whom would make you think like, oh, you know what, we're world beaters, we're going to make the playoff. And yet they're right on the cusp of doing that right now. Who's the second best team in the SEC? I ask you that question. I want to know in the comments below. Because everybody has a flaw in that resume. Everybody. And it's not just a nitpicky flaw where it's like, well, I'll get on third down against teams with losing records. They surrender 55% of conversion rate. They are glaring, obvious flaws. You lost at home to Notre Dame. You lost a neutral site game to USC, who is not very good. You lost to the team that lost to Vanderbilt. You lost to Vanderbilt. Somebody lost to Kentucky, who can't put the ball across the goal line. Tennessee couldn't score 3 touchdowns against Arkansas, a coach who I thought Sam Pittman coming into the season was going to get fired this past Sunday because of how the start of the season went for the Hogs. And instead, Sam Pittman probably earned himself an extension with the win over Tennessee. And I thought, you know what? You're going to lose to Oklahoma State. You're going to lose to A&M. You're going to lose to Tennessee. Get a bye week. Great opportunity to fire your coach. They're 4-2. Now, they got to figure out. And they're probably going to make a bowl game. I wondered if they were going to struggle to make a bowl game. Mississippi State, Louisiana Tech still on the schedule. Hogs are going bowling. They're not in the conversation today for who's the second best team in the SEC. But their losses are to A&M, who's in the top 25, and Oklahoma State on the road. Of the losses that you can compound in this conversation of like, hey, who's the second best team in the SEC? Arkansas's losses aren't nearly as bad as Alabama's, as Ole Miss's. And they barely lost to Oklahoma State, barely lost to Texas A&M. Missouri got the hell kicked out of them. So who's the second best team in the SEC? I don't know. I think it's likely that it's Georgia. But I saw what you did on the sport's biggest stage so far, and that didn't instill a lot of confidence. So I don't know. And I think it's going to be a hot second before that it's all worked out as well, right? Because just like Oklahoma has the opportunity to change the narrative around them, Georgia doesn't get the opportunity until next week when they host Texas. So I think the question is going to kind of continue to be out there of, like, do I feel bad for South Carolina this week? Yeah, because I'm pretty certain that Alabama is going to just dump truck them. Like, it's going to be one of the good old-fashioned, like, stop, he's already dead matchups. But I would not be shocked if that's just one of those, like, hey, let's go out there and leave no doubt. And Ole Miss has a stretch here where they can say, hey, if we can go to Death Valley and beat the brakes off LSU and then come back and beat Oklahoma, maybe we can be viewed as the second best team in the SEC. But we're not talking like this ain't figured out until the end of October. So there's all sorts of positioning and jockeying that needs to happen. And right now, when I ask you, point blank, who's the second best team in the SEC? I don't think you can give an answer other than, I don't know. And that's part of the fun of college football. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we are pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.